Hey guys, I was actually planning on perhaps starting my entire industrious life around the discovery of having cured my erection problems about 13 years ago, when it was not common knowledge at all that a person could actually fix erectile dysfunction and perhaps make their penis larger with various exercises. Something that I did partially do. Two things that I did accomplish to varying degrees. I did fix my physiological inability to have an erection, and I did slightly make my shaft larger, only in the corpus spongiosum area. There are 3 chambers in the penis, and the corpus spongiosum has a thinner myelin sheath around it, and it's a lot easier to stretch with just blood pressure. So that one did see growth, but the other ones, I didn't work it hard enough to even get probably close to the point of enlarging the other 2 shaft portions.
And it basically went from non-visible to about halfway to porn star.
There were a number of factors that made an otherwise very healthy looking mid and late pubescent male have physiological erectile dysfunction. And so I was really passionate about it after having fixed the problem that made me very insecure. And so I did a lot of reading about what caused erectile dysfunction. And it seems that the most common cause of erectile dysfunction is poor cardiovascular health and lack of usage of the tool. And lack of usage of the tool can commonly come from a need to go to work. Somebody who's stressed a lot or somebody who's being very responsible is going to have a very much decreased incidence of having erection because their state of mind is simply not the type that causes the inclination to reproduce. That's just how that works. How I fixed it, I didn't have any system-wide cardiovascular problems to speak of. In fact, I had an exemplary cardiovascular system, frankly. So I did not have any handicap there. I had a really good cardiovascular system to start with. However, the portion of my cardiovascular system in my perennial area was pretty significantly damaged because I would wear a 40-pound backpack with all of my school books, and I would bike on my single very large gear BMX bike. It was a larger BMX bike with like the 20-inch wheels or slightly larger wheels than normal. So it was kind of like a form-fitting bike. It wasn't too ghetto. And I would bike to and from school every day from, I think, 2nd grade to college. I would always bike. And my journey was about 2 miles in 2nd through 6th grade, and it was about 3.5 miles each way in high school. And I was too depressed, basically, to use a locker. I didn't want to tackle even more complications in my miserable life to use a locker. So all my books would be in my giant backpack, and it was putting a lot of weight on my perineum when I was bicycling. And because my life was so miserable, the pain of sitting on that bike seat with a 40-pound backpack, a very, very hard bike seat, going over those bumps, which, by the way, has even on nice bikes that they make for the Long Beach Police Department, for which there was a study in erectile dysfunction, it showed a significant decrease in tumescence for the officers who were on their bicycles, the bike cops, as compared to the rest of the force. And these bike cops, mind you, they're outside and they're getting some basic cardio all freaking day long. So their general cardiovascular health, I'm going to just guess, is better than the general police officer. So they had the opposite of a relative handicap there, and yet they still showed decreased erectile performance, significantly so, as compared to their colleagues. Anyway, so there is perennial damage that does occur after longer stints on a bicycle. And when you feel the numbness, you got to get up, you got to get the blood flow going. You've already, caused a minor problem. That's just the way it is. So you got to take those bike seats real seriously and pay really good attention to what kind of bike fits you so that you don't get damage if you're riding your bicycle. Now, so what that perennial damage does is actually somewhat similar to what an unhealthy diet and poor cardiovascular system do to the erection. Arteries are the blood vessels in your body that feed blood to your everything throughout your whole body. They're generally located more toward the center of things, of your extremities, your penis, your arms, your legs. And the arteries feed the blood, and then the veins bring the blood back to your heart. That's just the system. And in your arteries, I didn't read much about veins, by the way, so I can't tell you a whole lot about that. But in your arteries, there is an endothelial lining. And this endothelial lining is the barrier between the blood and the actual artery. And it's like a filter, and it's like a lubricant so that the blood can flow through really well. And when the endothelial lining gets damaged, then scar tissue can happen, fatty deposits in your bloodstream can accumulate there, and particularly attractant to these damaged endothelial walls are oxidized oils. Am I digressing here? I don't know. But anyway, the scarring and the blockage caused by collections of these oils are major factors that affect your erectile performance. Because how your erection works is you've got an artery that expands. It has smooth muscle tissue, and usually that muscle tissue is contracted. And your body sends signals, perhaps of quite varying strengths, depending on perhaps how much you use your organ. I don't know. I don't know of any study about that either. It sends signals to relax the smooth muscle tissue, and if you've got scarring there, then it is going to not allow the artery to relax. It's going to be dysfunctional tissue, which basically does a bare minimum job of letting the blood flow through without letting the blood explode in the rest of your body and you die, So with scar tissue there or blockage, what you're going to run into is a decreased blood flow at that point in the bloodstream. So if you're sitting on your perineum all the time and you're causing a bunch of damage, and by the way also nerve damage, which is a separate issue in that area, then your erections are going to be less tumescent. There's going to be less blood pressure available for the veins to block outgoing blood flow. You've got to pump in, and then you've got the veins which tie off the blood from flowing out to a certain degree. And you've also got the musculature of your perineum, like the regular skeletal muscle, normal muscles, called your pelvic floor muscles that restrict exiting blood flow and increase the tumescence and rigidity of your erection. So I had presumably scarring there, and from like age 15 to age 20 or so, I could not achieve an erection ever, and I wouldn't get. This is another issue that was a negative factor in my erectile health. I didn't get morning wood because I was miserable and in an unhealthy environment. I didn't have a door on my room for a number of those years, and I was unwelcomed as a person in my family household. My father didn't want to raise me. My mother didn't know who I was.
In fact, she had taken my brother's advice over the many years when we had conflicts, basically telling her that I was a bad kid and lying to her and manipulating her. And I was always at fault for things. She always thought that I was the one doing the bad behavior. And she basically thought I was a bad kid and didn't know me and rejected me. And since I'd been desocialized and I couldn't stick up for myself, form relationships, or properly express myself, I just had to give up at age 8 or something.
And in order to avoid heartbreak, I had to reject her to the point that when she died, I was not upset. And I'm still not very upset because I really did effectively erase my attachment to her. And then I had a stepmother who resented the fact that my father had children around at all because it reminded her of the poor relations that she had with her own sons. And so it hurt her feelings to have me around. And she wasn't a decent person who was going to take personal responsibility for that.
Incidentally, she was a public school teacher, not too atypical, and then her son, who's quite the cynic, became a principal. Doesn't look good for our kids, I'll tell you that.
And make it an effort to be a decent human being. But what she did is she sabotaged relations between my father and myself and basically made me discouraged from expressing myself whatsoever, which was already a major aspect of my personality that was developed at around age 3 and 4, when the only peers around were my brother and his friend, and they didn't want me talking to them, so they would insult me until I'd shut up. So I learned very, very early on not to speak my mind. I was very silent, so that at 13 or 14, when the heroin, steroid, and methamphetamine drug dealer up the street mounted me and took out his erection and at sword point threatened to kill me if I did not submit to his raping, I didn't tell anybody because I wasn't inclined to seek help or assistance, because basically my worldview truly was that people didn't care about me. So I was a broken dude in a miserable home environment who was very anxious and stressed, getting little sleep and not comfortable in my own skin. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of misery, and not much relaxation time where I actually felt relaxed. There was like very, very little time where I actually felt relaxed. And that was when I was playing video games, escaping my life. So I was busy playing video games instead of like masturbating, and I certainly wasn't being sociable. And the anxiety of having a non-working penis didn't help at all at school or anywhere. I was completely out of the loop in a lot of situations.
Pretty funny how I'd be chosen twice as a subject of false accusations of sexual advancement, considering I was so sensitive to such damage. And throughout puberty, I did not experience horniness in the way that other people did, and developed in a way that was much less inclined toward sexuality. Nevertheless, I lost my job and my place of residence as a result of those two accusations.
So, lack of sleep, lack of time actually relaxing, and physiological damage from cycling caused my erections to be non-functional. And how I fixed the problem is for $40, I bought a really nice Lazy Boy brand recliner. That thing was awesome. It was pleather, it was fake leather, but hey, it worked. And for 6 months, I basically sat at my computer and masturbated for hours on end. And I would stress, like working out, you have to stress your system in order to make gains. And I would stress my penis in 2 ways, basically. I would stress the cardiovascular system for endurance. So when it was physiologically difficult to achieve increased tumescence, I couldn't actually achieve an erection unless I used like a cock ring or rubber bands or whatever, which I do not recommend, by the way. They can definitely cause like nerve damage.
Speaking of nerve damage and reduced sensitivity, it does occur when you have a poorly functioning cardiovascular system. Just another domino stacked against you.
Nerve damage around the area that they're at, and they can cause a malformed penis where it doesn't like grow outward in the area where you keep the ring. And I think erection quality is probably going to be decreased by the usage of those tools. But anyway, I would masturbate to pornography, and helped great. Thank goodness for the internet, right? And I would basically keep going with keeping tumescence at the same time as doing Kegel exercises. That was major. And I did that for 6 months, and at the end of those 6 months, A, I got booted out because I was being unproductive. B, I was able to actually finally, for the first time since I was like, 13, 14, I'm not sure when, achieve an actual erection, a freestanding erection. It was a huge deal for me. It was such a huge deal that I'd started to plan my life around perhaps sharing this information that would, at the time, have been particularly empowering for the population. However, the only way that I could figure out to make money at this, at documenting continual progress using these exercises and making money at the same time, would basically be to be a gay for pay man whore. And I could not stomach the idea of being around sleazy gay guys. It's just too revolting for me. and there would undoubtedly be a ton of them. So even though I registered cockofrock.com and I spent a number of months like reading and writing about cardiovascular health and nutrition and erectile problems and how they're intertwined, and I learned how to program Drupal websites, nothing ever became of it because I just could not stomach moving forward with any plan that I could conceive of to make money reliably and make a living. So I had to totally change my life at that point when I discovered that I just didn't figure out a way to make it work. So probably the most common cause would be to have poor cardiovascular health. And there are a few ways to improve that. One is eat a diet with a low glycemic index. For some reason, this isn't popular in the diet community to track glycemic index of the food you eat, but it's really critical to the health of your endothelial lining. It's really critical to maintaining a healthy cardiovascular system. And I know it's hard to change your diet, so if you don't want to fix it, then that's your choice. But you have to have a net low glycemic index diet as well as get legit exercise, which I will define, in order to improve your cardiovascular health.
And some other info to help you avoid further cardiovascular damage is to stay away from trans fats. I'll get more into that later. I'll tell you something you've probably not become familiar with. And to eat fiber, because what happens is the cholesterol, actually it's lipoproteins, high density and low density, not just cholesterol, in your bloodstream that doesn't get absorbed, gets put back into your digestive tract. And if you don't have fiber to pick up those molecules and wash them away, then they get reabsorbed. But the problem with that is that since they've been in your bloodstream, they've become oxidized. So they become more damaging to your endothelium and are more inclined to stick to your endothelial walls and turn into clots. The thing about trans fats is that in a study with nurses, they were shown to remain in the bloodstream for 3 times as long. They aren't getting absorbed. And so what happens is that they oxidize 3 times as much, even though, well, I don't know about 3 times as much, but they do oxidize more because they're spending that increased amount of time in your food. They are preservatives. And here's the kicker that you probably haven't heard about. Trans fats are often disguised in the ingredients label by it saying mono and or diglycerides, mono and diglycerides. The mono and di refer to the fatty acid chains or the number of fatty acid chains attached to the glycerol molecule. 3 fatty acid chains attached to the glycerol molecule makes a triglyceride, which the FDA considers a fat. But even though mono and diglycerides have been tested clearly to be absorbed into your body calorically at basically the same rate per unit mass as normal fats, aka it's just like eating normal fat, the FDA does not consider these mono and diglycerides to be food. So they do not contribute to the nutritional information on the label, particularly when it comes to the trans fatty acid content description. Now, trans fats, it just describes a singular bond in each fatty acid chain. And if one of those fatty acid chain bonds is a trans bond, then it is a trans fat. But in mono and diglycerides, if there are trans bonded fats in those molecules, they don't get counted towards the trans fats label because your FDA cares about you, because you can always trust the government. They have your back. They are innocent. Corruption doesn't occur, and collections of power don't lead to corrupt people accumulating there because we are innocent, foolish products of the public schooling state.
And you should probably have proper micronutrient and macronutrient intake, as well as having that low glycemic index diet. By probably, I mean you should. So the low glycemic index diet allows your cardiovascular system to not receive those peak high sugar periods in which your endothelial lining is being consistently degraded. Those regular periods of degradation that do occur when you eat food that distributes sugars throughout your bloodstream is repaired during the times that you fast and that you aren't eating and that you're able to recover. And that's kind of the cycle. And you don't want your endothelial lining to ever wear down far enough to where it exposes the arterial wall and that's when it gets damaged. That's when you get clots. And one way to decrease the sugar load in your cardiovascular system is to increase your insulin sensitivity. This allows your body to use its insulin molecule to distribute the sugars in your diet to your cells more efficiently. This is major. It keeps the sugars out of your bloodstream, relatively speaking, and into your cells. So it keeps the sugars from damaging your bloodstream to a degree and gets it to your cells. And it's a significant degree. It's been a long time, but I think it's like a factor of 2 or 3 or maybe more.
That is the degree to which someone can increase their insulin sensitivity, or decrease it by eating crap and sitting around, aka the modern urban lifestyle. However, completely avoiding any endothelial damage when you eat is pretty much unavoidable, but majorly avoidable.
So how to increase your insulin sensitivity is with proper, legitimate exercise, and that is 85% of your maximum heart rate for 30 minutes or more, 3 or 4 times a week, which I'm not doing because I'm just not somebody who really cares about myself enough to do something like that. And that's a major problem. And don't look to me to figure out how to really fix that problem, because I haven't succeeded at that one. Not entirely anyway. I've made some major improvements by reducing my stress, by finally having some success in life, being able to freaking relax. This environment in which we have to spend so much money just to live is terrible. That's a significant contributing factor to why I support the visions of our founding fathers. And I support the vision of having a land of the free and the home of the brave, because affordable conditions could easily be made to happen, and more available money to those who wish to work would easily occur. Life would be so much easier in a lot of ways. And I digress. So, get that exercise, low glycemic index foods, Kegels, and periods of erectile exercise where you simply maintain increased tumescence. So pornography is great, comfortable chair is great. If you have a bunch of money, you might be able to get a surgeon to put somebody's donated main artery and graft it to one of your arteries and give a direct line to your penis or something. Then you could have this massive blood flow to your penis. That would be interesting. But since we don't live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, they might not be able to perform that experiment on you. And you might want them to perform a similar experiment on mice first or something, right? And if you have a lot of money, you could probably pay for that. Maybe you can get a grant if you're a college student on testing that. Oh, more research about male erections. Hey, we got to have something to live for. Males can't get research dollars in a lot of other ways. We're underrepresented in the college communities. So we need more funding. We need to feel more included. Our interests need to be more included in college research stuff because we're a minority group. So I hope this video has been at least quite informative, because I did kind of go over most of the stuff that I remember from 12 or 13 years ago. And good luck, man.